I'm Alaina. This is Evie, and this is Queer and Friends podcast. My pronouns are she/they. I don't have a label for my sexuality. I'm not really sure where it is. It's just fluid, just all over. Um, I am an artist and a creative, as well as a law major, but that's not as relevant to my personality as other things. I I am disabled and struggle with anxiety, depression, and panic disorder, as well as an eating disorder. Trying to think. My favorite color is green. And yeah, I think that's about all I got.
So I'm Evie, or I also go by Sierra. Evie's more of like a nickname I'm trying to get to catch on. And my pronouns are they, them, and theirs. And I am non-binary. And I also kind of like the label genderqueer and trans. I'm pansexual. And I am disabled as well. I have panic disorder and OCD, and I've struggled with AMPS, which is amplified musculoskeletal pain disorder, since I was like 10 or 11, and TMJ, and I have endometriosis and PCOS. And my favorite color is also green.
Oh, Lord, I didn't know that.
Oh my god, I have so much green in my closet.
I feel like we both wear a significant amount of green.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that it's like a thing now. I'm seeing it more. It's making me happy.
Yes, I like that.
So, our podcast is called, as Alaina just said, Queers and Friends. And why we're doing this is we're taking inspiration from the title of the 1977 pre-AIDS fantasy novel, which is entitled The Faggots and Their Friends Between Revolutions by Larry Mitchell and illustrated by Ned Astra. So our podcast is entitled, like a shortened version of that, The Queers and Friends. So we're using a reclaimed slur that applies to a more broad group of people, including us, and that would be queer. Kind of as a reclaimed slur that not everybody in the LGBT community identifies with or has reclaimed, but it is one that is becoming more prominent because it's a bit more inclusive, as we're going to talk about. Mostly the L and G are emphasized in that model of activism. So this book is anti-capitalist, it's anti-patriarchal, it's anti-heteronormative, and it's in a lot of ways also exploring, the system as CIS dash TEM, and transness as a whole. It's written in allegory, so it's very up for interpretation, and it is so unique because it was written before the AIDS epidemic ravaged the queer community, but after the Stonewall riots. So there is this empowerment, this progress, and this lack of fear that we want to explore, the way that they were reimagining society. And the book, as I said, is written in these really polemic allegories, and if we want our podcast to be anything, it is definitely polemic. Centering our podcast around this book is a testament to our distaste for assimilationist gay and lesbian activism, and in honor of the queer ancestors who we never got to know, we want to start with or incorporate readings from different queer poets, including this work, writers of prose, not limited to, Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, Gloria Ansandula, and more.
Yeah, so I think the whole reason why we're doing this is we want to create a space for education. Um, Everyone is still learning and growing. You can always have room to process and analyze and learn more. I'm still learning constantly every day as a queer person. And I think a lot of queer people don't know about these topics or reference points. And I think it's important too to share interpersonal experiences so that way you're able to, apart from research, able to learn from each other. It's really important to gauge and have a safe space to raise awareness um, for the issues that we are currently facing as queer people. Um, and I think too, with each episode, I think Sierra and I want to focus on having a spotlight or some sort of mutual aid foundation or organization, um, whether that be individual funds, GoFundMe's, gender affirming surgeries, reparations, anything that we can allocate and advocate for someone. We would definitely like to bring that to the forefront as well. Um, Overall, it's just a safe space for queer people and people that just want to learn and know and be more inclusive with their dynamic and their language and history. Yeah, so I think a lot of time too with queer representation, it's limited to cis gay men, specifically like cis white gay men. Um, like when you look at movies or TV shows, like for example, like Schitt's Creek. I don't know if you guys watch Schitt's Creek, but it's a cis white gay man that represents the gay community, and there's so much more to that. Like Black trans women are misrepresented, trans people in general, pansexual people. Um, just there's a lot that has to be talked about that is not talked about because people just like to remain comfortable. So, um, yeah, so a mix of like history, conversation, personal experience, and a way to boost mutual aid and practices to be able to help those.
Yeah, definitely. Wait, I totally get what you were saying about Schitt's Creek, but that character actually is pansexual. He's pansexual, but
Oh, really? I
it
didn't
is
know
very
that.
white, and but like Modern Family, like that's what a lot of
Yes, that's
people's
a good one. Yes, right.
exposure is,
Or like growing
and
up, it
they,
was like Ellen DeGeneres.
oh
You
yeah,
know?
yeah, we don't want to,
No,
we don't
we
claim
were trying
her.
Ellen.
Oh my god.
That's
Yeah, so yeah, history, personal experiences.
yeah.
We want to signal boost mutual aid,
A little bit of
and
everything.
yeah. So it's our first episode, so we wanted to kind of introduce ourselves and talk about our experiences, so there would be a baseline um, for our future episodes where we delve deeper into these issues and talk to other people about their experiences, just so you kind of get where we're coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
Gain like a stronger sense of like, um, just it's hard to be personable during a pandemic, so it's nice to get to know each other a little bit more, feel safe about like who you're having these discussions with. Um, so yeah, my experience as a queer person, I was born and raised Roman Catholic in a strict household, as well as I grew up. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lancaster County, but it's very much like rural, religious area, very small-minded, conservative. So a lot of my identity was dealt with repression within the Catholic Church. So coming to college, it was me having to start to identify who I was as an individual, what my sexuality meant, what my gender meant. Um, so a lot of my struggle comes from religion and the Roman Catholic Church, and it took me a long time to figure out what it meant to be queer for me, and that wasn't until very recently that I've become comfortable with that. Um, I was raised in a very Christian-minded household where LGBTQ is not something that is discussed, and if it is, it's not something that's discussed in a positive light. Thankfully, I did have a really safe coming out situation, so I was able to find comfort in my mom. So thankfully, that was something good for me there. But I think also with all of that comes a lot of like identity crisis and, like, trying to figure out what you look like from a young age, like, gender dysphoria, and that's where, like, eating disorder, depression, anxiety, all of that plays in, because when it comes down to it, like, the religion is I feel like a big factor into OCD, or, like, a coping mechanism that people can tie to. A lot of fear-based, so I think I grew up a lot in fear. So then a lot of what I had struggled with, or, like, with my gender identity, was, what does it mean to be fearless in my true identity, apart from religion? But yeah, I think I'm at the point now where I'm just trying to find this, like, not performing femininity for the male gaze, because why should I? But I think a lot of even, like, last year, I would, like, want to dress a certain way to, like, get male attention, but I don't want male attention, so why would I do that to seek male attention? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think now it's just a bunch of, like, androgyny and just finding out what that means for me. I think that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so confusing, because it's like, am I doing this because do I like this, or am I doing it for someone else? And
right.
But
am
also
I doing this to feel safe? Like,
me doing this has nothing to do with other people, but you know what I mean? Like, and then you're like, oh,
right.
but it kind of does. And then it just keeps going around and around. Because you would, no one's born, like, shaving their legs or doing these things, but we do them. Yeah, like, I went through a period recently where I, like, grew my leg out for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
Because I was always so, like, horrified of it, that I, you know, just starting in middle school, like, I was just horrified, because I would always get intrusive thoughts. Everyone was looking at me, everyone's doing this, everyone, like, cares so much about these little things in my body, because I was, you know, scared of being picked on about it. And I did it, and then I realized, I was like, nah, it's kind of itchy, so, like, I kind of do like shaving.
Right.
So, like,
but you realize that, like, you enjoy that for you, rather than, like, society standards.
Yeah. And it was just interesting. So I was like, I didn't care how it looked, but I was like, it doesn't even grow even or anything. Like, it was just the front of my leg. I was like, oh. But it's crazy how I'd never even want to have known that.
Right. You're like, maybe if it wasn't patchy.
Yeah, I was like, oh. So funny.
That is funny.
Yeah, so for me, there's a lot of intersections between our experiences. So as a child, like, I explored gender, I would say, a lot, but I didn't know it was that or call it that. It was always odd to me how activities were so gendered. Like, I tried the Girl Scouts, but, like, I didn't like it because we weren't doing the things that all of my friends were doing, because most of my friends are boys. That's who lived with me in my neighborhood. And I was just always, like, a tomboy and dressed basically as a boy for the first 7-8 years of my life. And then it started to be like a point of judgment from other people, especially adults too. Like, looking back, I feel like the other kids, that wasn't as bad. It wasn't
an issue with the kids. It was more so, like, adults and parental figures. Or figures.
Exactly. It wasn't as bad until, like, I noticed, like, once I wore a pink headband, and then all these, like, my friends' parents were commenting on it and all this stuff. And just, like, little things like that would happen all the time, like, and then I was like, oh, well, am I supposed to do this? And my sister is 7 years older than me, and she's really beautiful, and she's very feminine, and she was, like, doing, like, some modeling stuff at the time, and I just, like, I was like, I don't look or feel like that, or, you know, so it was just a lot of that, a lot of trying to perform femininity and obsessing over it, with my OCD, lots of intrusive thoughts about that. I did it to be, like, felt I wanted to feel like I was meeting the standard
Right.
in order to avoid judgment. Yeah, and then as I became more comfortable with myself, I realized that I wasn't really more comfortable with myself. I was just
right.
tailoring my image, you know, like in high school, say. And I was just trying to be, I would say, like, preppy, because I was like, oh, well, that's a respectable person, and that you know, that's this and that. And my mom, I think that there's a lot of generational trauma with rape culture. So, like, victims, like, her victimization led to her seeing the world in these maxims, like, if you dress this way, you will be raped. Like, being told from a young age, like, don't be in the locker room alone, or you will be raped, or, like, if you dress like this, you point blank, like, you will be. Like, that was really hard, you know, with clothes, everything I was wearing. I'm already judging myself because I'm not feeling comfortable in my body or with what I'm wearing, but and then when I do feel comfortable, I'm being told I can't be wearing that. Especially, like,
Right.
with, like, having a big chest. Like, that was just so hard because you're told that you're trying to look sexual or you're trying to look for attention or something, when it's like, no, I'm just trying to wear clothes and be comfortable. Like,
Right.
and just the way that AFAB people are sexualized without their consent, especially children and teenagers.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you've had experiences with dress codes at school.
Right. Even like from elementary school, I feel like AFAB people are. It's always like sent to the principal's office for your shoulder showing, or it's always like the sexualization of children is more important than the education,
Mm-hmm.
or like the yeah. From a very young age, it's all very sexualized.
Yeah, and it's very discriminatory, like, between bodies, between people of different races. Like, these rules, the way that young black girls are adultified from a
Right.
young age, and then, you know, that they get more scrutiny from administration at school. I definitely saw that at my school. The way that the rules were enforced differently on different body types too, like being tall. If I'm gonna wear shorts that go to my fingertips, they're literally gonna be Bermuda shorts. Like, when I was 13, my
I would say you're very
proportions,
tall.
yeah,
Yes.
my proportions were very, you know, they're off when I was that age, completely off.
right.
And I couldn't even find clothes that were that long. And then I would get made fun of by other kids for dressing like a middle-aged woman. But I was just trying to, like, I'm like, I can't do anything right.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and there's also a big influence with religion on me, as you were saying, like, uh, the rules in religion and the way that you're told about LGBTQ people, the way you can internalize that, and if anyone has, you know, even, I think, even if you don't have any mental illnesses,
Right.
like, that's, the way that it affects you is still insidious. But so for me, it was especially so because with OCD, it's like the rules, and, like, you feel like everything's life or death because you're told it is.
Everything is life or death. Yeah.
Yeah.
In their theory. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very, very intense. Like, I remember at the Bible camp I went to every summer. It was all girls, and there was one male maintenance man and I think one male lifeguard on the premises at any time, but nobody could wear a bikini. You couldn't have your bra strap showing. You couldn't have shorts that were below a certain length. Couldn't wear tank tops or tube tops. Like, and it was heavily policed. Like, how it was for me at home too. So for me, I felt like it was normal. Some girls were, like, having to wear t-shirts over their, like, bikinis, because they were, like, breaking the rules, and the way that you're told your worth comes from your, your chastity, or like they literally tell you that, like in some of these fundamentalist circles, like you're I mean, thankfully my dad didn't give a shit enough to do anything like this, but they're like, you're basically married to Jesus your whole life, in a way.
Yes.
That's what you're taught. And then you're married to your father with your promise ring up until you get married, and then you're married to your husband.
Right.
And it's just, like, that's so scary to me. Like,
it's
and imagine
terrifying.
being queer dealing with that, like, because you're already being told that's wrong.
Right.
Yeah. But they try to twist it so it's not hateful, but it is hateful.
But it is. They're like, oh, we love you, but not the sin. It's like that's what I was always told. It's like, we don't support the sin, but we love you. Or it was like, or like, what was like another I would always get? Be like, I love you, but I disagree with how you are.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how can you love me conditionally?
We don't hate the sinner, we hate the sin.
Right.
But that's the same ideology.
Like, I think
Oh, no, you go.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, that's the same ideology that, like, Westboro Baptist uses.
Yes, exactly.
They're like, well, we don't hate gay people, but we're gonna say you're gonna burn in hell and God hates you and stuff. But we don't hate you.
Yes. Literally.
We're just looking out for you.
But we don't hate you. Right. We're just here to protect you. I think so much of it, too, that I found, like, so infuriating was the fact that, like, it was, like, they could not, like, at least the church that I belonged to was, like, they could not forgive my sin, but it was so easy to forgive, like, somebody that was cheating on their wife, or, somebody that had, like, stolen money, or, like, there's so many other sins committed. How is my quote-unquote sin so much worse than somebody else's? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's so easy to pick out queer people within, like, a religious institution and use that for, like, a form of hatred.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way of, like, I'm trying to protect you, I'm trying to show you, like, the truest light of, like, love. I feel like it's just, like, an easy way to target somebody.
Oh, yeah, and it's also a very easy way to abuse people. We're gonna have an episode coming up on conversion therapy, and I think we should definitely delve deeper into this topic of fundamentalism, Christian fundamentalism specifically, because I don't think a lot of people know what's going on in the United States, like right now, to queer kids, because a lot of these programs are outright conversion therapy.
Right.
And it's all fine because their parents are signing off.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's completely awful. And one other thing you said I want to talk about is the intersection between body dysphoria and body dysmorphia.
Yes.
Like, I have struggled with eating disorders in the past, and the way that they exacerbated each other, because for me, I didn't actually start to understand the shape of my body and get over parts of the things that fueled my ED, until I understood that I had dysphoria.
Yes. I don't think I realized that until this past summer, after, like, I think when I started to make physical appearance changes that had, like, presented more androgynous, like, presenting looks, I didn't realize that, very much as had you said, like, body dysmorphia and dysphoria can almost be, like, siblings in a way. It's like, I think a lot of time I would do things with my ED that would, in my head at that time, it was like it would insist control. It was just a control aspect, but looking back, it was more so like trying to, while feeling dysphoric, but also like at the same time trying to fit a body that I am not present in, like mentally or physically. So it was like where does that line fall? And like where, I just feel like there's so many intersections with that, and like especially too, not even like an ED, but just like any sort of mental health factor playing into, yeah, I don't know, it's
because they're extremely different, but it's
right.
The way that they interacted for me, it was like my body does not look feminine enough. Like my body just or I'm it was like my body didn't look the way that other girls looked, and that's what I was trying to be, but I knew that I wasn't, somewhere deep down, but I wasn't acknowledging that. And I feel like they intertwined and like went apart and would come together again like at different times, because I don't know, I feel like it was kind of tied to my lack of understanding of my gender. But I don't know, it's definitely not, I wouldn't say it was like that for everyone, but it's also just conceptually about your being present in your body, as you were saying.
Right, exactly.
Which is so hard, and it's so sad that it's taken away from so many people just because of, like, obviously eating disorders are not completely caused by society, I guess, right? But they're largely,
exactly.
You're largely conditioned in ways that make you view yourself a certain way, and then contribute further to the body dysmorphia. So I don't know, if that makes sense.
No, I think it's all very, I still find it very confusing. Like, I've told you this before, like, still struggling to figure out what gender means to me. I think it's still, like, very, like, something new for me. I think it's hard for people to, like, especially if you struggle with that on top of it, it's hard to, like, process, like, separate the two of them, and then figure out, okay, well, what does this have to do with this, and what does the other one have to do with this, and how could they play the same role? Yeah. Or maybe not at all. Maybe like a completely separate role, and you're just dealing with two components, It's a very like tricky slope, I feel like.
Yeah, and that's why it's so frustrating when people are like, oh, well, why does your identity matter so much? And it's like, well, this is something that I've been building my whole life. Like, I've been trying to understand. Right. So, of course, it's going to be something that's important, but it's not really the word that's important. It's more so like, I'm in charge of, I guess,
you.
Myself, yeah. How
right.
You don't have to perceive me this way, but this is how I am.
Right.
Like,
right. Yes.
Yeah, and you can't change that. Yeah, because
why wouldn't you want to be recognized as who you are when you spend hours a day thinking about what is my perception of myself?
Yeah.
In all forms, like emotionally, physically.
Yeah.
Why would you not, like, to just, like, put it on the back burner and be like, well, it's just for me, like.
Yeah. It's like, this is something I was literally hiding my whole life. Why wouldn't I play it up now?
Right, exactly.
In action. Yeah, and I think the male gaze too, growing up, like, you're taught that that's everything almost.
Yeah, literally.
And it feels like everything is filtered through that as well, and that's all based on heteronormative standards, and it's all gendered, and everything is gendered.
Yes, literally everything.
So there's that too.
Right.
Which makes everything even more confusing.
Right, literally.
So the current event we wanted to talk about today has had some developments.
Yes.
So we're talking about the Equality Act. So basically, the Equality Act has some explicit non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people, including employment, housing, credit, education, public spaces and services, federally funded programs, and jury service. So basically, it makes it so in places like retail stores, banks, transportation, legal services, you can't be discriminated against because of your sexual orientation or gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually passed a few days ago.
I'd say that was that Thursday?
Hmm.
Past Thursday?
Yeah, I think, or Friday. Yeah.
Friday, one of those days.
Yeah. And one of the really big things was this one woman.
Our favorite person.
So her name is Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is a representative from Georgia. So there's a lot to go over in this picture. So first of all, you have a thank you for the US Capitol Police heroes. Okay, yeah, they did protect all of you guys from people that share the same conspiracy theories that this woman
Right.
pushes.
Right. So it's kind of
Given that they're
probably going to protect you.
Yeah, so. Whew. And then, so she slapped the sign up very matter-of-factly, post some videos about it of herself, making some political theater out of the whole situation. And it says there are two genders, male and female, trust the science. Yeah, so she is in staunch opposition, as are a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are completely against the Equality Act because and this is as you can see, an opinion piece which is obviously in agreement with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Says our athlete daughters shouldn't have to compete with transgender women. And this is a huge part of this whole idea. And why she and other people like her oppose the Equality Act, because they think that it really threatens girls, especially little. They keep saying girls. You see, as a woman, I've competed in sports and I'm so thrilled I was able to do that, but I competed against biological women. Biological women cannot compete against biological men. Biological little girls cannot compete against biological little boys, and they shouldn't have to. So this whole term of biological women, biological men, it is just completely incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ridiculous. People are still using
They literally
pseudoscience.
state, right, they say that this cannot be ignored. It could be very dangerous. What with this entitles dangerment? I don't understand.
Girls deserve a level playing field. This is from the USA Today opinion piece. Fairness, safety, and common sense all hang in the balance. Our daughters deserve to compete in a fair environment and have their futures. Literally none of this. They're trying to make this is literally a turf's wet dream.
It is.
Like they're like, we can't go backwards for women's rights.
Oh my god.
When trans women are women.
Right, trans women are women. So why? And it goes back to the whole I don't think we've talked about this yet, but the whole sign that she had posted outside stating there are two genders, male and female. I think we talked about this before, Sierra. Does that not contradict itself? It makes no sense. There are two genders, male and female. Male and female is like a sex.
It's a
Gender
sex
and sex are
designation.
completely gender and sex are two completely different
Yeah.
topics.
So here's the down low for anyone listening who doesn't know about this. Gender and sex are completely different things. So for the sign to say it's science, there's two genders, male and female. Male and female are sex designations, and they're not the only two sex designations.
Right.
So there are people who are intersex, and this can manifest in many different ways with the presence of certain levels of hormones, certain chromosomal, what do you call it, outcomes, or like the way
Right.
that they present themselves in different people. There's different, it biologically isn't just men and women, male and female.
Right.
Those are two sex designations that people are assigned, but that's not gender. Gender expression is completely different.
Right.
Your
And that
gender
is completely fluid. Like what gender is a social construct that we have made through heteronormative, like Western society culture.
Yeah. And all of these fears, it's really just fear mongering, and it's a common tactic of white supremacists and transphobes and all people of the like, who are trying to cause fear and twist the situation, because in reality trans people are more at risk of being assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
Trans people's lives are at risk every day just for existing, especially trans people of color, especially Black trans women.
Yes.
And it's the same kind of fear mongering that's used by white supremacists to say, like, oh, white women are in danger of being raped
Mm-hmm.
by men of color, or are, even the way that queer people are viewed as like a sickness, or like trans people are trying to trick people, and when it has nothing to do with that. And the way that she says trust the science, like in quotation marks, is no doctor would abide by that statement. It really doesn't make sense.
It's the
even
same
if
concept. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, if she wanted it to make sense, she should have been like, there are only two genders, men and women, I guess.
Right.
Which there's not, but at least that would have made sense.
It would have made a little bit more sense than what she had put up there.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Letting trans people participate in have protections not to be discriminated against. It's not even about them doing sports. Like, that's not even like the main
that's not
purpose
even
of the
issue.
Equality Act.
Right.
Yeah, it's just an inclusion, and it's not dangerous to cis people in any way. If anything, cis people are dangerous to trans people.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's just puzzling how this woman is like a QAnon conspiracy theorist, a representative in Congress, and it is allowed to act like that. Like,
that would never happen or pass if it was a person of color or a queer individual.
Yeah, putting up
that would never be allowed.
Like, if someone put up a thing that said like white supremacy is terrorism, there would be an uproar. Even though it is
outrage.
It is.
And that's true.
But people don't like to admit that white supremacy is terrorism, because then it leads into the whole idea where they could easily be like, oh, well, that's neoliberalism. But it's not. It's just, it's the same thing as we've talked about before, about how like being alt-right conservative is just as dangerous as being far left liberal.
Yeah.
Both are very dangerous points of view.
Yeah, well, it's dangerous to be a liberal because you're saying, oh, I mean, Martin Luther King in a letter from a Birmingham jail, he says that the white moderate, white liberal, the neoliberal, the white liberal is the most dangerous hurdle for liberation because they will look you in the face and acknowledge your oppression, but disagree with the way that you pursue liberation,
Right.
and and not be committed to giving up their own privilege, their own the social capital that they've gained through these inequities.
Right.
And I think that's extremely true, even true more so now. Like
Absolutely.
we're told, oh,
Biden's gonna change it all.
do this, do that.
But yeah.
In reality, he's just giving things different names. He's
Right.
but calling detention center, calling prisons for families, waiting centers, or
Right.
immigration centers. It's all the same thing.
It's all the
Like,
same thing. It just sounds better on paper. And I think
Drop-
too that's why people were so excited when Biden won presidency. They're like, oh, so many things are going to change. It's like, no, things are just going to be covered up, or it's going to have a prettier sound to it so that you guys don't have to feel as bad or be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I saw these tweets people from like political pundits. I'll put them in the like for people to look at later. But they were saying, oh, I'm so happy that we had a military attack with no drama from the president. No saying I'm a great military leader, no televising of the bombs dropping, just no drama. Like, wow.
Yeah,
so
right.
you don't want, you don't actually care about the violence that happens at the hands of our imperialist country. You care about having to hear about it from a racist person. And it's just so selfish, and it's like, oh, I don't want to be uncomfortable. People are uncomfortable by Trump because obviously he's horrible. I don't like Trump, but
Nobody likes
him
Trump.
being out of office isn't gonna change the way this country works and is built to function.
Right.
Like, what's the difference? I'm sure everyone has seen the picture of US like jet dropping a missile, and it says like under Trump, and it's the jet was like Blue Lives Matter on it and Make America Great Again. And then under Biden, it's the same thing. It just has a pride flag because they're trying to appeal to they're trying to appeal to corporate pride, and it has like another leftist saying on the thing because they're just trying to appease people. They're just trying to appeal to us. The system isn't going to change, no matter how symbolic they want to be, or how many promises they keep and then they make and don't keep.
Yeah. The system was built for the way the system is built is the way it's going to be for the rest of however long it's going to last. Like, this system wasn't built to, there's no way that powerful white cis men are building the system for everyone to thrive. There's no way.
Yeah,
that wasn't the foundings of it, and it's not gonna change. Just because the presidency changes doesn't mean that the groundings and foundations of harm and discrimination and everything else that's wrong with our system is going to be any different.
Yeah, and even with the Equality Act, this isn't gonna. I mean, it's a step. It's a step in the right direction, but these people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, those representatives are going to go back to their states and they're going to make legislation that invalidates this. It's going to go to court. It's going to, and it's just going to go on, and it's not going to change the way that people are treated. If anything, the protections might cause more anger and outlashing against queer people, and it doesn't address like the intersection of identities either. And is it ever gonna be a good thing to be protected?
Yes.
Being a protected class has very real benefits, but it's also
Right.
it's so limited because we're never going to be liberated by a state that isn't for us anyway.
Right.
Like, and especially an imperialist, violent, militant, neoliberal government.
Yeah,
Not gonna
no, that's
really
not gonna
end our
happen.
liberation, but it is a nice thing to see. But then you see all the more Democrats right now like trying to queer bait, and they're like, oh, I'll put a
Yes.
trans flag up, and we support trans people. Well, the woman who did put the trans flag up in protest of Marjorie Taylor Greene, her
Has a
trans
trans
she has
daughter,
a
right?
trans daughter, yeah.
Cool.
But I
Gotcha.
just mean like all the people tweeting about it, and they're like, we
Yeah.
need to pass the Equality Act. It's like, do you just want voters? Like, we want
Right.
healthcare.
Right.
We want housing. We want protections against violence.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
It's
do you
Still,
wanna?
it still scares me because I feel like I'm still scared for like Black trans women for gaining healthcare rights or even housing rights. I'm still very scared to see how this will play out.
Yeah, because even when there are protections against discrimination, racially discriminating in jobs, it happens all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So this goes in directly what we're talking about. So as we just said, the act isn't going. We're not going to get liberation through these means. So a great way to contribute to liberation and the building of a reimagined society is to donate to For the GWORLZ. So you can follow them on Instagram at FOR the and then GWORLZ, which is spelled GWORLZ. And we'll also put the link to their website where you can donate directly. They collect and distribute funds to pay for rent, medical care, and gender affirming surgeries for Black transgender people. And Black trans people can receive to apply funds, and this organization is really amazing. They are very transparent about all the donations and where the money goes, and the money does really go directly to the assistance for rent, medical care, and gender affirmative surgeries. So you can send a Black trans person money today and pay reparations in that way.
Mhm.
I think we'll also do a segment on reparations and why it's important to pay and budget for reparations as non-Black people
Right.
and non-Indigenous people. And another thing to mention is we're going to be posting a Google Drive that's public. So there'll be a few docs on there that you can view. We're going to have reading resources if you want to look at them, and buying resources like how to ethically buy books, a running list of the mutual aid places that you can donate to and individual calls, and also links to everything that we talk about in the episode. And if you want to learn more about things we mentioned, so like we mentioned the term AFAB a few times, I'll probably put a page that explains that means assigned female at birth. So if you're listening and you're not familiar with all the language we're using, I encourage you to interact with those resources, because an important part of supporting queer people, I think, is also learning on your own a little bit, looking through things further. Yeah,
absolutely.
Alaina, do you want to end the episode by reading
Oh, yes. Let me pull it up. Perfect. I was just reading it yesterday. I was reading some, I haven't got through the entire book entirely, so I was reading bits and parts of it, but let me scroll to the page. Also, the art in here,
Oh,
chef's
it's so
kiss.
beautiful. I want
It's
like
so
a tattoo
beautiful.
of it.
That would be really cool.
It's really beautiful.
It is. So, Sierra and I had discussed about ending or starting each podcast with a little snippet from the faggots and their friends between revolutions. So this is on page 13. And it states, the faggots cultivate the most obscure and outrageous parts of the past. They cultivate those past events which the men did not want to happen, in which they did happen. They wanted to forget. These are the parts the faggots love the best. And they love them so much that they told old stories over and over and then act them out, and then, the ultimate tribute, they allow their lives to recreate those obscure parts of the past. The pain of fallen women and the triumph of defeated women are constantly and lovingly made flesh again. The destruction of witty faggots and the malignancy of beaten faggots are constantly and lovingly made flesh again. And so these parts of the past are never lost. They are imprinted in the bodies of the faggots, where the men cannot go. So I think it really just wraps up, and it is important to, it sets, like, I think we talked about this earlier in the beginning of the episode, it just sets a really good understanding for liberation and what a society would look like outside of what we are currently in. And I think, as we said, the book just does a really good job at looking at all of the intersections that have to do with that.
Yeah, and it's dreamy, it's up for interpretation. It would be considered vulgar by a lot of people, because a lot of these reclaimed words, you don't really hear them a lot unless you are a queer person.
Right,
so I feel like to somebody who's not queer, like reading that would kind of make them uncomfortable, which is kind of the point, to be like,
sit with the uncomfortable a
be
little
comfortable with us. Why don't you be the minority?
Right,
right. Like, just feel that. How
Yes.
Yeah, and that's also a big part of anti-assimilationist and more subversive queer activism. It's like, yeah, we're gonna keep saying these words that you call us, because not only does it take the power away from them, but I can, take a piss at your abuse and say, like, this is what I am and this is what we are, and I can explore that to such an extent that I'm basically writing a fairy tale about it.
Right.
Yeah. And the passage you read,
it.
the passage you read is basically like, it's kind of haunting to think about what came after that was written, because now even more so we're grasping and we're trying to understand a lot of our own queerness through the people who were visibly queer, but then so many of people in that generation were taken away because of AIDS, because of the inaction from the government.
Right.
So yeah, it's an especially hard time right now, especially with COVID. Like, we don't have any queer spaces.
Right. There's no safe space for queer people to go to, feel protected and feel heard,
Yeah. So everybody, if you're listening, send some money to For the GWORLZ.
Yes.
No matter how much it is, it will still contribute to necessities for trans people's surviving and thriving. Yeah,
because all $1 can make the entire difference. You never know.
Yeah, and we'll talk about budgeting for that, and like making it an important part of your anti-racism and pro-queer practices.
Yes.
Yeah, because liberation isn't going to come out of nowhere.
Right, exactly.
It's something that has to be fought tooth and nail for, as we know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to say anything else before we close it out?
I don't think so. Thanks guys for tuning in, listening to our first episode here. Again, as we said before, this is just kind of like an intro, get to know us, so that way you feel safe listening, better understanding of who we are, where we're coming from. It'll help to gauge our personal experiences, because a lot of what we, apart from education, it's personal experience. So that'll help gauge where we're coming from.
Yeah. So we'll see you next week here on
Cool.
Queers and Friends.
Yeah, cool.